Hey, everybody. It is Wednesday, January 29th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Winunu. This is the place where we bring you just the facts and we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. As some of you can probably suspect by now, I am solo here today. Jill is under the weather, so hope to be reunited again tomorrow. In the meantime, get well, Jill. We should know to all of you that today, January 29th, marks the start of the Lunar New Year or Chinese New Year. It marks the beginning of a 15-day festival. We head into the year of the snake today. Last year was the year of the dragon. They go on these 12-year cycles. I should note anyone born this year will be born in the year of the snake. They are recognized for their keen insight and extraordinary intelligence. So if you are pregnant or having a baby this year, a heads up that your child will be born in the year of the snake. Also, years of the snake, if you were born in 1965, 1977, 1989, 2001, 2013, basically every 12 years. All of you are also born in the year of the snake. I should note as a birthday in 1982, I was born in the year of the dog. But I digress here. Let's get to today's headlines. A lot of news out of Washington because why not? That's what we're getting used to here, at least for the next few weeks, months, years, as a lot is happening right now. Trump has taken Washington and the country by storm. Yesterday, late afternoon, a federal judge stepped in to stop Trump from implementing a massive federal spending freeze for grants and loans. This created chaos inside Washington and across the country. We'll explain what happened. It comes as President Trump is also offering more than 1 million federal employees a deal. If they quit their jobs, they can work from home till September and still get paid. We'll break it all down. The hope from Trump is that 100,000 plus employees could walk away. It's been a huge goal of Trump and DOJ. So we'll get into their goals and questions here as to whether this move is legal. We will check in on egg prices. I've been hearing from a number of you that you're paying up to $10 for a dozen eggs. They're getting near record levels again. Some parts of the country is slightly cheaper than that. Don't expect it to change anytime soon. We'll explain. On Capitol Hill, we'll be watching a major hearing today. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. up for Secretary of Health and Human Services. We expect hard questions from both Democrats and Republicans, and it comes as his cousin Caroline Kennedy put out a video saying, "Do not confirm my cousin." Staying in Washington, the White House had some answers for those drone sightings seen in New Jersey back in the fall. We'll tell you what they revealed. A case out of California, a woman who helped more than 100 Chinese women get into the U.S. to give birth, what's called birth tourism, is sentenced to prison. It comes, as we've been telling you about the push against the 14th Amendment by the Trump administration. We'll break down this case. And some business news, Starbucks is making a comeback with a gain in sales. We'll tell you what they're doing right. And of course, I will have on this day in history your clue. This is how the song starts. Bum, 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 bum. All right, let's get started with our lead story here. A wild roller coaster of a day in Washington again, with minutes to go Tuesday afternoon before a sweeping new freeze in federal spending was set to go into effect. A federal judge blocks temporarily President Trump from pausing tens of billions, maybe hundreds of billions in federal spending. It was set to go into effect at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Just minutes before that, a U.S. district judge saying, hold on here, let's hit pause. The Trump administration plan had plunged the U.S. government into a panic, a lot of confusion across the country. I heard from hundreds of you who thought you might be impacted by this. Nonprofits, as well as 24 states, sued Trump, who late Monday night, the administration basically said, by 5 p.m. Eastern Tuesday, we need you to pause all spending that goes against the basic goals of the Trump administration and all the executive orders we had signed. Government doesn't move that fast, led to a lot of confusion. It was a very brief memo, so it was pretty vague. People were generally confused. And so there was a collective freakout in Washington on Tuesday. Hence the lawsuits, hence the judge saying, let's hit pause here. So the judge not saying that the move here by Trump to pause federal grants and loans was unconstitutional, though Democrats and opponents here are arguing that. The judge just saying, let's rule on the constitutionality, but before we do that, let's not let this go into effect. So the judge in this case, going to hold a hearing on Monday. Lawyers on both sides will prepare their arguments. So a stay here when it comes to the major move to pause loans and grants. Keep in mind when we're talking loans and grants, it's a financial lifeline for local government, for schools, for nonprofits, research, early childhood facilities, retirement facilities, a bunch of programs for the impoverished, just a lot there right now. Right now, President Trump saying he wants to ensure all spending moving forward immediately complies with his priorities, with his recent executive orders, of which there have been several dozen. Again, the memo late Monday night saying you have about 18 hours to figure this out and then halt all spending by 5 p.m. Eastern Tuesday. Again, that has been paused by a judge here. Nonetheless, there will be a lot to figure out in terms of the legality of this, whether the president had authority to do this. As written, experts say that a wide range of federal services, including funding for homeless shelters, health grants from the CDC, disaster aid, would have been inaccessible. Now, they did have carve-outs for Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits, a number of other programs, direct assistance programs that were not affected. But ultimately, given how general the order was, thousands of programs were thought to be impacted here. The White House actually had to put out a clarifying memo midday on Tuesday to try to lay out more exceptions. Hey, by the way, we also don't mean for this to cover a bunch of other programs like Head Start and others. Nonetheless, the judge saying still way too vague here. Let's hit pause. This moved too quickly. Notably, on Capitol Hill, a number of Republicans were unfazed, despite the fact that Congress allocates this funding. The way that our government works is that Congress holds what's called the power of the purse, allocates the money, and then says, Department of State, Department of Education, this is what you're going to spend it on. In this case, you have the White House overruling that, saying, we're actually going to pause that spending. We're not going to spend that. And so that leads to questions about constitutional authority here and whether the White House is overstepping. Nonetheless, for the most part, Republicans still very much in line with everything Trump wants to do here. They were getting phone calls and emails from constituents freaking out. For the most part, you did have some Republicans who were concerned about this, but for the most part, they said, this is Trump's authority. He's allowed to do this. That said, on the other side of the aisle, sitting Democrats were united in their outrage here. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer condemning the decision on Tuesday, calling it lawless, dangerous, destructive, and cruel. Take a listen to Schumer.
In an instant, Donald Trump has shut off billions, perhaps trillions of dollars that directly support states, cities, towns, schools, hospitals, small businesses, and most of all, American families. This is a dagger at the heart of the average American family in red states, in blue states, in cities, in suburbs, in rural areas.
So that was Schumer, not surprising. Meanwhile, as I mentioned, Republicans pretty deferential here. Some calling it legitimate oversight, that this is ultimately his administration and he gets to spend the money how he wants to. Take a listen here to Republican Senator Kevin Cramer of North Dakota on Fox News Tuesday night, asked about this. This is how he explained it.
Welcome to Donald Trump's presidency. I mean, like I said, every day that he's been the president, he's been fulfilling promises. I know that's unusual for a lot of people. My gosh, the president actually does what he said he's going to do. But once again, it started out as chaos. It's already calmed down. It'll be fine.
So Cramer there, the Republican, acknowledging it was chaos, but it will be fine. He didn't really get into the fact that one of the reasons things are calmer now is because the judge decided to pause the order. Nonetheless, this is something Trump has promised to do, right? This is something that a number of his supporters were looking for, that he was going to blow things up, not follow normal procedures, take positions that would be tested in the courts, because it's his belief that government doesn't function well. And so he has to approach things in a creative way, in an urgent way, and break some things, break some china, if you will, in order to get things done the way he sees fit. So ultimately, that's a lot of what we're seeing here when it comes to various moves Trump is making. And he knows that a number of this stuff will be tested in the courts, as it was in his first term. The thinking, though, is that given the people he's brought in, the amount of time they've spent on this, a number of these people worked on what was called Project 2025 over the Heritage Foundation, a 900-page plan for what to do with the government. Some of what he's been doing in the first week is in line with that Heritage Foundation document. Again, when it comes to the budgeting issue here, the financial impact still unclear. This could actually work up to $3 trillion in government spending, which is something Elon Musk and Trump are looking to cut out, especially when it comes to the fact that they're looking to extend the tax cuts from 2017. That means several $1 trillion less in the government coffers, which means typically the government would have to borrow it unless they can find the cuts. So right now you see some drastic moves by President Trump and the administration to try to find cuts here. Now, the legality, again, of this order will face challenges. Budget experts and constitutional experts looking at this saying, we don't think the White House has authority here to overrule Congress. Nonetheless, we'll see how the courts rule on this. One of the many cases we'll be watching. A reminder, hundreds of billions of dollars come in federal funding flowing to the states, nonprofit organizations here. Some programs you might not be familiar with that get federal funding. Some of the hardest hit sectors, if this was to go through, nutrition assistance, education programs, disaster aid, as I mentioned, community health programs, all relying on federal grants to operate here, which is why nonprofits, states decided to file suit here. So we'll watch that case over on Monday. In the meantime, that wasn't it from Washington. The Trump administration, late Tuesday, offering more than 1 million federal workers the option of a buyout, an effective buyout, through a government-wide, what they call deferred resignation program. If you're a federal employee, you probably received this email. We heard from a number of you who got this email. It basically says, if you resign by February 6th, we will allow you to work remotely through September, and you might get less responsibility, but we'll pay you through September, including benefits. So not a buyout saying you go home on February 6th and you get paid out. Essentially, you still get to work, but we won't force you to come into the office. That's been a huge priority for Trump, is getting people into the office, even if they've never been in the office, even if they work thousands of miles from the office. Even there's many government offices where essentially it's all remote employees. They don't actually have an office that could actually hold everybody. Nonetheless, a big issue for Trump, a priority for him. The idea behind this attempted, again, buyout or a deferred resignation program, the White House is hoping between 5 to 10% of federal employees take the buyout. That could be several 100,000 people. The White House hoping that for the most part, they don't have to replace any of those people, that they downsize government in this case, and they save taxpayers, they think, somewhere between $50 to $100 billion a year in salaries moving forward. Now, this has been discussed a lot by Trump, by Elon Musk, and what's called the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. Now, officially, DOGE isn't in charge here. Trump is in charge here, but people noticed parallels between how Elon Musk handled his purchase of Twitter and how he pushed out employees and how things were being handled in the last 24 hours, including the email itself. The subject line that government employees got, fork in the road, notably, same subject line Elon Musk used several years ago when he bought Twitter and tried to downsize and effectively downsize the company by nearly 2/3. Now, this is a risky move, according to people who watch this. Ultimately, when you offer everyone a plan and you don't really know who might take it because you haven't really done the recon in advance, you don't know. You could see way too many TSA agents take this deal, IRS, customer service people, air traffic controllers. It could lead to major issues, delays, frustration for Americans. Ultimately, if too many people in one sector or one department or one agency take it. So again, a risky move here. For the most part, we've heard from people who don't plan to take it. They want those government pensions. They like their job. They don't see opportunities right now in the private sector. But we did hear from some people who were like, I was already looking for a job. I'll take this deal. I'll work from home for the next 6 months and call it a day. Now, one would argue that part of the goal here is to frustrate government employees and create enough chaos to get people to leave. They are very much Trump, Elon Musk, others. They are of the philosophy that the government is best that governs the least. And so ultimately, they think government is bloated. They think it wastes too much money. And so they're hoping to get as many people out as possible, even if it's not nuanced and they're just sort of going broad strokes here when it comes to just, hey, everyone and anyone, basically besides the Postal Service and the military, you guys have this deal before you. I heard from a State Department employee, a friend of mine, who said that effectively the way they see it internally is that the Trump administration is trying to agitate federal workers into accepting the buyout, into leaving government, just make life difficult for people in order to leave, allow him to potentially hire loyalists or just make government much smaller. Now, this again is something that could see lawsuits. There are folks on Capitol Hill Democrats who say that this is a ploy, that this is a trick, that people might not even be paid between taking the deal and September, given the state of allocations from Congress. So that's something we'll closely be watching. Again, just sort of the latest move, drastic move here, and one that will likely be adjudicated in the courts. Before I leave politics here and we head into the speed read, I should note one other headline that caught our attention yesterday. Over at the White House, the new press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, she's the youngest press secretary of all time, 27 years old. She gave her first briefing yesterday and made a headline that ultimately we here at Mo News were paying close attention to. She says that they are rolling out new seats in the White House press briefing room for new media, less traditional media voices, folks who work in podcasting, social media, content creators like yours truly here. They're looking at a revolutionary media approach. They say that ultimately Americans trust traditional media less. And so ultimately they want to make some seats available in the briefing room, take questions from non-traditional media. So there's an application for that. We have applied. I will keep you guys all up to date on this podcast and over on Instagram and the newsletter as to whether we get a seat and head down to Washington to use one of those new media seats sometime soon. All right, now time for today's speed read. Let's start with the price of eggs, which so many of you are talking about. Not so excellent. Sorry, I had to go there. This is from the Associated Press. The expanding bird flu epidemic is forcing farmers to slaughter millions of chickens a month, pushing U.S. egg prices to more than double their cost from just 18 months ago. Right now, it doesn't look like, guys, there's much relief in sight given the surge that'll be happening around Easter in the coming weeks here. Now, the average price for a dozen of eggs was $4.15 in December. That's the average for all 50 states. We have heard from some of you, though, that are paying upwards of $10 for a dozen eggs right now. And we're like, where is it $4? I would totally take that deal. And my understanding is Iowa and some Central Plains states, it's still less than $4. And then some of you are paying more than double that in various states right now. Now, we should mention peak egg prices. A couple of years ago, the average hit $4.82. Again, we're at $4.15 or $4.20 or so. But the Agriculture Department does predict that egg prices will go up another 20% this year. So there is a likely chance that we will see an all-time record when it comes to egg prices. Right now, shoppers in some parts of the country, again, paying more than double the average price that you saw a while ago. A number of you telling me that you're seeing empty shelves at local grocery stores. You can't find eggs right now, given the bird flu situation and what they have to do to deal with the bird flu. Organic and cage-free eggs, even more expensive here. And so this bird flu outbreak continues. Unfortunately, this is not like previous ones where it sort of happens and then goes away. The bird flu, as we've been telling you, is hitting cows, is hitting other animals. And so that ultimately means that you are seeing the bird flu then go to other animals and then come back to the chickens. It's just not going away. Right now, 145 million chickens, turkeys, and other birds have had to be slaughtered since the current outbreak began. The vast majority of them egg-laying chickens here. One thing that is to blame here is that cage-free egg laws in 10 states may be responsible for some of the supply disruptions and price increases. Ultimately, they set a sort of space requirement for chickens and cage-free requirements, leading to the bird flu here transferring between them and other animals. All right, back to politics now from CBS News. A big hearing we're going to be watching on Capitol Hill today, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The link is in the show notes. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., President Trump's very controversial nominee to run the Department of Health and Human Services, will appear before the Senate panel that needs to vote on him before it goes to the full Senate and will need to approve him. This is the Senate Committee on Finance. They will be casting the deciding vote here on whether his nomination goes to the full Senate. Though we should mention there's today's hearing and there's another hearing tomorrow before the Senate Committee on Health, Education, and other issues. That's more as a nicety. They won't be voting on him. It's the Senate Committee on Finance, today's hearing, that's really going to matter here. They'll be looking at a number of things. Remember, as a head of HHS, you're running things like the CDC, the FDA, the NIH. a whole bunch of alphabet soup of major agencies that deal with the nation's health here. And he is going to face difficult questions from both Republicans and Democrats. We've told you about it. Now, Kennedy's supporters like the fact that he questions ultra-processed foods, the risks of synthetic food additives and dyes. Broad appeal there among Republicans as well as some Democrats that could help him here. It's going to be an interesting sort of combination of folks who are both for him and against him. Through the FDA, Kennedy says that he wants to exercise more authority when it comes to how foods are regulated, labeled, recommended to the federal government. But ultimately, there's a lot of criticism, a lot of concern here, including from a number of Republicans who want to question him over his record of misleading and unfounded health claims, his work, his questioning of vaccines at times, including polio shots, and ascribing to various theories, some of which have been disproven. Now, he has sought to assuage concerns when it comes to his vaccine views, saying he will not be banning any vaccines. Nonetheless, concerns about just his overall vaccine skepticism through the years. And so that's, you're hearing that from a lot of Democrats, as well as a handful of Republicans. And then on the right, you have Republicans who are concerned about his liberal stances when it comes to pharmaceutical companies, when it comes to abortion. Remember, Kennedy, as of last year, was still a Democrat. He's pro-choice. And as Secretary of Health and Human Services, he does have authority over how the FDA regulates medications used for abortions that will not be in line with the rest of the administration. So he will have to figure out how to answer those questions, whether he will defer there to President Trump since he falls in his cabinet, and see how he assuages the concerns of those folks on the right. Again, there's a link in show notes. That hearing is at 10 a.m. Eastern. One thing I'm sure some people will ask him about, his family. It turns out, we've told you, the Kennedy family, very divided here. It's mainly a Democratic family. Of course, RFK Jr. Moved to Trump in the last year. And so among the people criticizing him in the last 24 hours, his cousin Caroline Kennedy, JFK's daughter, she wrote a scathing letter to senators on Tuesday calling her cousin, RFK Jr., a predator, addicted to attention from airing dangerous views on vaccinations, and someone who is unfit to be the nation's health secretary. She urged lawmakers to reject his nomination. She made a 6-minute video warning lawmakers to vote against him. And she said that she had hesitated to speak out, but that this is too important. Take a listen to RFK Jr.'s cousin Caroline here.
He lacks any relevant government, financial, management, or medical experience. His views on vaccines are dangerous and willfully misinformed. These facts alone should be disqualifying. But he has personal qualities related to this job, which for me pose even greater concern. I've known Bobby my whole life. We grew up together. It's no surprise that he keeps birds of prey as pets, because Bobby himself is a predator.
Sharp words there from cousin Caroline Kennedy, though not surprising given the divide in the family here. Other relatives have also spoken out, including RFK has like a lot of siblings. So his brother Joe Kennedy, his sister Carrie Kennedy have also called him at times deplorable and untruthful. And so we'll see how much of an impact that has, but ultimately really interesting hearing to be watching today. All right, now from the New York Times, Trump has promised to spill the beans on those drones over New Jersey in the fall, and we got some more details yesterday. His new press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, I mentioned her earlier, read a statement from President Trump at the press conference yesterday related to that rash of reported drone sightings over Jersey in the fall. She says officially, they were generated by legal drones that were flown with authorization from the F.A.A. She read a statement from President Trump. Take a listen.
After research and study, the drones that were flying over New Jersey in large numbers were authorized to be flown by the F.A.A. for research and various other reasons. Many of these drones were also hobbyists, recreational, and private individuals that enjoy flying drones. In time, it got worse due to curiosity. This was not the enemy.
Important phrase there, not the enemy. That's something you heard effectively from Biden, but they were reluctant to really give details on how much they knew. It left them open to a lot of criticism, including from then candidate Trump, then President-elect Trump. And he said, once I get in office, I will clear up for Americans what exactly was going on. So you saw this statement yesterday. Trump had said for a while, I don't understand why Biden isn't more clear and open about this, because he was also receiving his own intelligence briefings. And so he put out the statement yesterday that the FAA knew about all of this and everything was legit. All right, now to this from CNN. A California woman was sentenced Monday to more than 3 years in prison in a long-running case over a business that she ran that helped pregnant Chinese women travel to the U.S. to deliver babies who automatically would become American citizens. A district judge out there gave Phoebe Dong a 41-month sentence, ordered her to immediately go into custody here. She and her husband were convicted in September of conspiracy and money laundering through their company, USA Happy Baby. That was the name of it. The sentencing comes as we've been telling you about birthright citizenship. It has been thrust into the spotlight here with the return of Trump. He has issued an executive order to narrow the definition of birthright citizenship. That has now led to a legal case here. A judge has temporarily stopped that, but ultimately going up through the courts here will be the definition of the 14th Amendment and whether anyone that is born here, including if your parents are here illegally or temporarily, is an American citizen. So this case, this particular case, what they call birther terrorism, is getting a lot of attention here. They apparently helped more than 100 pregnant Chinese women travel to the U.S. And scheme their way to get them into the U.S. so they can then give birth to the children who are American citizens. They worked with others to coach the women on how to trick customs officials by flying into airports they believed were more lax in sort of inspecting this sort of thing, made the women wear loose-fitting clothing to hide their pregnancies. They would charge tens of thousands of dollars each to help their customers here effectively buy citizenship for their children. A notable case here. There are businesses that also cater to people from Russia, Nigeria, some other countries where this idea of birther tourism is big. There have been some other cases. Those people, some of them have been able to leave the country, but ultimately she and her husband were caught. And so I imagine you might be hearing about this in light of the other developments related to what Trump is pursuing with his executive order. All right, leaving politics now into business. From Bloomberg News, good news for Starbucks. Its most recent sales declined less than expected, which is a win for them. It is a sign that customers are starting to come back to the coffee chain. Last year, sales fell 4%. That was better than the 7% decline that was expected. So they're taking that as a win. The new CEO there, Brian Niccol, we've told you about him. We told you about him in the fall. He did big things at Chipotle. And so Starbucks was very excited to get him over to help the slumping company. Some of the recent steps they have taken at Starbucks to upgrade the diner experience include bringing back ceramic mugs and the condiment bar. The company has also dropped the upcharge for non-dairy milk, rolled out new advertising focused on its heritage. And so it looks like they're making some headway here when it comes to regaining the trust of all of you. It does come, as we know, coffee prices are up right now due to drought, climate change, some of the issues in some of the larger coffee growing parts of the world. All right, we end here as always with On This Day in History. On this day in 1820, 10 years after a mental illness forced him to retire from public life, King George III, you know him, Americans, he was the British king who loses the American colonies. He died on this day in 1820 at the age of 81. Ultimately, he was king through the loss of that war. And then after, he was actually declared insane in 1810. His son effectively takes over at that time. 10 years later, on this day, he would die. All right, a bit of poetry history for all of you. On this day in 1845, Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven was first published. For those of you who remember the poem, Nevermore. All right, on this day in history, the U.S. Baseball Hall of Fame elected its first members to Cooperstown. Quite a class. Honus Wagner, Babe Ruth, and Ty Cobb on this day in 1936. And giving us the term axis of evil on this day in 2002, George W. Bush, as president, delivers a State of the Union address where he declares Iraq, Iran, and North Korea are an axis of evil, trying to develop nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. There were people in the Bush administration that were hoping to take out the leaders of all those countries. They, of course, would begin with Iraq, but given the chaos and instability that would ensue there, that's where things would end in terms of the pursuit of the axis of evil at that point for the Bush administration. And finally here, a bit of music history. On this day in 1981, Dolly Parton's 9 to 5 tops the charts as the movie 9 to 5, the comedy, which also stars Dolly Parton, comes out. Dolly was actually recruited for the film by actress Jane Fonda. And apparently when Fonda first approached her, Dolly Parton said, I will do this movie, but only if I can write the theme song. So thanks to Jane Fonda for inviting Dolly to 9 to 5 so she could write this iconic song. All right, we want to thank all of you for listening to the Mo News Daily Podcast. If you like what you hear, leave us a review. 5 stars, of course, especially over on the Apple app. That's where things make a difference in terms of rankings and calling attention to our podcast. We've seen incredible growth here in the past couple of weeks as the news cycle has been insane. So we appreciate all of you for sharing the podcast with your friends, family, neighbors, Uber drivers, Starbucks baristas, as you guys return to Starbucks. Frankly, anybody that you think could benefit from reliable, verified, nonpartisan news. Jill, feel better. Hope to see you back here tomorrow, as well as the rest of you.